Hello. In today's video, we're going to talk about cellular respiration. If you look at this word, you notice the first part, cellular. So obviously we're talking about something that's happening in cells. In fact, cellular respiration, in one way or shape or another, is going to occur in all cells on planet Earth. And we look at the second part, respiration. And this might make you think of like to respire or to breathe. And it does have a little bit to do with gas exchange, right? Interactions with the gas molecules around us. Now, let's look at the definition. What exactly is cellular respiration? It's breaking down glucose in the mitochondria, producing carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So if you notice, this definition reminds us a lot of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, we were building glucose, now we're breaking it down. In fact, cellular respiration is going to be the reverse reaction of photosynthesis. So plants use photosynthesis to make glucose as a way of storing energy for the short term. And then plants will also turn around and use cellular respiration to harness or to put to use the short-term energy stored in the glucose molecules. And in fact, we also, as consumers, use this same reaction, cellular respiration, to liberate or to release the energy contained in glucose and carbs that we ate, either from another animal or plant source. So where is this glucose being broken down? It's going to be broken down in the mitochondria. We'll talk more about what that is and under what conditions will the mitochondria be involved. And when we break down glucose in the mitochondria, what are we producing? What are we making? Well, we're going to make carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So photosynthesis was a way for us to trap energy. Cellular respiration is the reaction that allows us to re-release that energy and put it to use in our bodies, both in consumers or heterotrophs and in autotrophs. So let's look at the chemical reaction. Our reactants for cellular respiration are now glucose and oxygen. And after the chemical reaction takes place, what are we going to produce? We're going to produce carbon dioxide and water. Now, you may notice that also, like in photosynthesis, light wasn't included in that reaction, and energy is not included in that reaction because the energy produced is kind of like a byproduct, and it's not necessarily a direct chemical product of the reaction per se. So this would be the proper chemical formula for cellular respiration. And some of you may have already noticed that it's the exact same equation as photosynthesis. It's just backwards, right? It's just kind of the reverse reaction. So glucose would be something, a carbohydrate that we eat. Or in the case of plants, they made it via photosynthesis, right? And so for us to break this down, we need oxygen, right? And that's a gas found in the air around us. And if there's enough oxygen, we can break down glucose. And what do we form? We form carbon dioxide, which is a waste gas, right? That would be released from our cells or that we exhale. And then water, right? And so we're going to release water over the course of the day as we respire. So as our bodies break down sugars to provide us our energy, we're going to exhale carbon dioxide. We'll breathe out some water vapor. We'll sweat out some water, and we will excrete some water in our wastes. Now, again, something to notice, so you can't see at the bottom there because that little tab keeps popping up, but all living organisms are going to perform some form of respiration, some way of harnessing energy from various biomolecules, mostly your carbohydrates and your lipids because they have the highest concentration, lipids having the highest, but carbohydrates being fairly easier to break down for most organisms. Now, there are two important distinctions that we need to make before we move forward. There are two main groups of respiration. We've got aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now, when you see that word aero or aerobic, think air, right? Back in the day, they used to call airplanes aeroplanes, right? Or if you're a engineer who works on airplanes, you might be a aeronautical engineer, right? So aero is referring to air. So aerobic or aerobic respiration involves oxygen. Oxygen must be present. You have to have oxygen for this type of respiration. This type of respiration does involve the mitochondria, which is something we'll talk about here in 1 second. And aerobic respiration produces more ATP, more energy. Now, this should make sense to most of you guys. If you're in the weight room or you're trying to exercise, if you hold your breath, are you going to be able to produce enough energy to lift the weight or to sprint down the track? No, you have to breathe, right? Breathing gives us the oxygen we need to have the energy we need. If you're about to lift something really, really heavy, if you ever watch like powerlifting competitions, right before they start, you might see them, they're breathing in lots of oxygen so they can produce a ton of energy to lift that really heavy weight. Anaerobic, right? We see the AN in front of that. That means without or no oxygen. This is a type of respiration that can be performed without oxygen. Okay. Now, this occurs in the cytoplasm. You're thinking, oh no, what's that? We'll talk about it later. Don't worry about it. And it doesn't produce as much energy. So if you're underwater and you're swimming, right, you notice that the longer you hold your breath, the less energy you have. And that's because when you first took your breath, you had plenty of oxygen for aerobic respiration, which produces lots of energy. But as you continue to swim, you're running out of oxygen. And your body is slowly moving from aerobic to anaerobic. And since you move to anaerobic, you have less energy, you start to feel more tired, and you might just start to feel a little panicky, right? Because now your brain doesn't have enough oxygen or enough energy to function properly. So aerobic, lots of oxygen, lots of energy. Anaerobic, not a lot of oxygen, not a lot of energy. But we're going to talk about aerobic respiration first. So where does aerobic respiration take place? It's going to take place in any cell that has access to oxygen and any cell that has a mitochondria. So this is a diagram of a leg muscle in a human being, right? So these are skeletal muscles, right? And there's also different muscles in our bodies. We have skeletal muscles, we have smooth muscles, which would be muscle cells found in our intestines, in our stomach, in our throats, and cardiac muscle would be a heart cell, right? Heart muscle cells. So all these muscles, they need lots of energy, right? They're constantly working and they need a constant supply of energy. And they're going to perform lots and lots of aerobic respiration. So as long as we have eaten and we've got plenty of glucose, and as long as we're breathing and getting plenty of oxygen, our bodies will perform aerobic respiration. And where is that going to take place? Well, if we're going to zoom in on a single muscle cell, and you'll have to excuse my cheesy little cartoon diagrams, you can see these tiny little red jelly beans. These are the mitochondria, right? Or mitochondrion if we're talking about just one of them. So these are lots of mitochondria. And you've probably heard in memes or on TV or on the internet, these are the powerhouse of the cell, right? So the mitochondria are going to be what break down glucose using oxygen to produce lots and lots of ATP for our cells. Let's look at the mitochondria up close. Okay, it is a tiny organelle. So the mitochondria is very similar to the chloroplast, but instead of making sugar like the chloroplast, the mighty mitochondria breaks it down, right? And so this is going to be the powerhouse of the cell. And the sugars will break down, enter this mitochondria, and if there's plenty of oxygen, aerobic respiration will take place, and it'll produce lots of ATP, okay? And that will occur inside of the mitochondria. Well, let's look at a very hyper simplified diagram, right? So here's our little mitochondria with all of its tiny little folds. And maybe this is inside of a muscle cell because muscle cells need lots of energy. So they're going to have lots of mighty mitochondria. We have to first ask ourselves, what does the mitochondria need for aerobic respiration? Well, it's aerobic, so we need oxygen, right? And so we need to make sure they've got plenty of oxygen for aerobic respiration, and we need glucose, we need sugar. So if there's plenty of sugar and plenty of oxygen, they'll enter the mitochondria, and inside of the mitochondria, aerobic cellular respiration will take place. And the glucose molecule will be broken down. Right? It'll be broken down, releasing energy. And that energy will be released in the form of ATP. Now, remember, we talked a lot about this in our biomolecules unit, right? ATP is kind of like the battery or the energy transferring molecule that our cells use, right? So the energy in glucose is released and stored, right? Or used to charge our little cellular battery, ATP. And then we've got some waste products, right? And so we break down the glucose with oxygen. We're going to produce carbon dioxide, right? Which is a gas that we need to exhale, right? So you inhale, you breathe in oxygen. It gets used for aerobic cellular respiration. And then you breathe out carbon dioxide. And we're also going to release water. And this can be found in our exhalation. If you look at my glasses, you can see the water vapor collect. That is a product of cellular respiration. We're also going to sweat out water, and we're also going to excrete it. Okay, so these are the products of cellular respiration, and these are the reactants. Now, you need to know that if oxygen is not present, right, if for whatever reason a cell does not have enough oxygen, aerobic respiration will not occur. But there is another way that our bodies and other cells have that allows them to still get some energy out of glucose. And I'll talk about that in the next video. Thanks for joining me.